A team is a group of people that trust each other, not just work together, was probably one of my most favourite quotes from my chat today with William Perry, Vice President of Global Sales at Lucanet. On this episode, we spoke about a topic that, in my opinion, isn't discussed about enough regarding high-performing teams, and that is conflict management. William started his career with the Foreign Service, specialising in sports diplomacy and conflict resolution training. His fieldwork has taken him to conflict zones around the world with a focus in crisis communications. This is such an interesting conversation where we discuss sticky negotiation tactics, communication, clarity, and the different styles of conflict and how to address them. If you enjoy this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of Sales Unfiltered. Today I am joined by Will Perry to talk about conflict management. Will, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Izzy. Pleasure to be here.
So you've got a really interesting background. I mean, you have led sales teams most recently, but back in your previous history, we won't show your age or anything and say how long ago was that, but you did study conflict management. So before we get into a bit of your background and why this was an interesting topic for you, to give a bit of framing to the listeners that are listening today that maybe are unsure of what this is, what is the definition of conflict management?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think conflict, it depends on the practitioner, the theorist, who you ask on this. For me, conflict is the pursuit of incompatible goals by different groups. That's how I would define it. But conflict is an interesting, when people think of conflict, they automatically tend to kind of come back and deploy the avoidance style of conflict management.
Yeah.
There's fundamentally 5 different styles of conflict management, and understanding those styles is really crucial, right? To building a formidable way to operate when you're in a crisis situation. So you have, if you think about it, kind of in a quadrant. So on the y-axis, you have highly assertive, and then on the x-axis, you have you have a cooperative scale, so from low to high. So on the high scale on the y-axis, you have, when you think about it, competitive, and then you have collaborative styles. Okay, so then on the bottom side of the quadrant, you have avoiding and accommodating, and then right in the middle is compromising. So the ideal is to be top right, which is collaborative, to be the thing that most organizations get wrong. And I would say organizations are dreadfully bad at crisis management and conflict transformation, is often people go highly assertive, but on the wrong side. And they'll be highly competitive and trying to prove someone is wrong. And instead of looking at how do we transform or how do we resolve this conflict?
Is this similar to the quadrant that's written in the Radical Candor book? Because I know that's something that a book that you love.
Yeah, it's a great book. I'm not sure. Kim Scott may have referenced this. So this is because
it was like ruiniest empathy, radical candor, like whether you're caring about the feedback that you're giving to somebody.
Right.
You're doing
that may have been something similar in her book. But yeah, this is something in grad school that I picked up, one of the frameworks.
Yeah.
But ideally, I mean, you're looking at this, you don't want to be highly competitive when it comes to conflict, but you also don't want to be accommodating and be a rug, a carpet, where you're pulling back your wants and letting the other party get everything they want.
Yeah.
Right. And if you look at this, you want to be you don't want to be avoiding where like, oh, there's a conflict, let's just step away entirely.
Yeah.
So the ideal is to be collaborative. That way you have the right mix of cooperation with assertiveness, and then right in the middle is compromising. So there's times where you do need to deploy these different styles depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So
it's a really fascinating topic, and it's something that I don't think people talk about enough at all. And I know you want to get onto this, how businesses don't train people in crisis management. A lot of you mentioned like HR, they get trained in this, but actually as sales leaders and even reps working within tech sales, we need to be aware of conflict management because there's a hell of a lot of it in tech sales.
Yeah.
But stripping things back, and thank you for giving that summary before we start delving deeper into the topic. This is clearly something that you have a huge interest in and you studied when you were younger at school and university. So what was the reason for you getting into this world of conflict management?
It depends how far back we want to go with that answer.
When you were born.
Yeah, when I was born. Where I really got interested in conflict management, conflict resolution, for me, it started, I'd say, early on, I lived in Detroit, Michigan. I lived in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I lived in some highly impoverished communities. And I think for me, seeing the penniless poor, those who did not have a lot of means, understanding why there was tension between them and some of the outside community, some things I witnessed at a young age. And then that all kind of converged when I paired up with a professor at the university I went to, where I was his teaching assistant, and he was a peacebuilding practitioner that worked in conflict zones. So then in that would have been in my early 20s, that piqued my interest. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do my undergraduate thesis on international relations and conflict resolution. That led to a research grant living in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, studying conflict in the favelas and arbitrating conflict between the state government of Rio and local leaders inside of the favela.
Wow.
And I was doing that through the medium of sport. So that's where I got involved with sports and peacebuilding.
That's so incredible. And we spoke before when we were talking about this topic, there's so much correlation between people working in sports and then working in sales, and there's so many transferable skills. So I'm sure you've seen so many things in Rio de Janeiro working in the government too that you can probably translate. Well, what were those key things that you picked up that really resonate today with you as a leader working with sales teams that you're like, gosh, there's such overlap here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say the first thing is understand your surroundings.
Yeah.
You need to, okay, I'm going to go on a quick story here. I think the power of stories in sales
I love it.
and anything you do is so key. So if you think of a time where you've been snorkeling or in the water or out swimming, often if you look closely, just under the water line, you'll see anchovies or sardines often swimming in large groups. Right? I don't know have you ever seen that?
Yes.
When you've been out? Okay.
I'm a scuba diver. So
Yeah, there you go. So imperceptible from looking top down.
Can't see.
And even below water, unless you're really looking right up at the surface, you almost see the shimmering
It's like a
contrast.
membrane almost. Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is when you think about, if you don't think to look and understand your surroundings, one, you won't see that and notice it. But what's actually interesting, if you see the presence of calm groups of anchovies or sardines just under the water line, that'll actually tell you a lot about what's happening in your immediate atmosphere. And as a diver, that actually might be a good early warning system to help you know if there are larger predators like tuna, mackerel, other things in the vicinity where those fish would not be behaving in the same manner. They would scramble really quickly. They'd be erratic and tightly packed together. Or worse, there's a shark in the water. Now your safety as a diver, as a human being, is in peril. So if you just pause to seek to understand, to understand your surroundings, that's not just going to tell you that, oh, look, that's pretty. There's a bunch of sardines close to the surface. It's going to tell you a lot of other things that could influence what you do next.
Yeah.
So again, breathe and then seek to understand.
You're so much smarter with your analogies than me, but all I can think of is Finding Nemo, you know, when they are going through the tunnel and all of the fish just disappear. And they're like, what's going on? It's so quiet.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden the jellyfish come. This is a great topic and heading for the episode, like how we can build high-performing teams learning from anchovies. That was really good learning.
Yeah, exactly. We could do a whole presentation on this.
We could. That would be so fascinating. And from specifically, you mentioned your sports teams that you're working with. Was that, I know when we spoke previously on our prep call, you were talking about how people were on this team from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and how working towards one common goal. Could you share a bit about that story? Because I think that that's really powerful for people working in teams as well when we talk about diversity of thought. Yeah,
absolutely. So to bring that, so what I did in Rio de Janeiro, or work that I've seen carried out in other conflict zones, so Northern Ireland, Belfast, seeing Protestants, Catholics using basketball there with an organization there that I visited called Peace Players International, to West Bank, and being out there and seeing Palestinians and Israelis coming together on what we'd call as mixed teams, where instead of playing against each other, further entrenching at a potential conflict, they mixed. So that coming together and then understanding, working, cheering on each other as a means to understand, to build ties, and ultimately be more effective. So the way that that's done in the workplace, when you think about, often people tend to cluster with people they know best, right? And that's natural. It's human behavior. But look to what I've always found to build a high-performing team is find people in the ecosystem cross-functionally that you don't know well. Bring them in. Be inclusive. And oftentimes what I've done is actually made a point to take them out to lunch, someone that I don't know well that's in a different department, get to know them, build those bridges. That's going to help you run faster. And if a crisis does happen, where it could be a contractual issue, it could be a customer's pushing back on pricing, right? Very common. Something internally is going on. You have people that know you, that you understand, because you've made the effort to get to know them, right? To understand your surroundings, to seek to understand.
Yeah, you said an incredible quote about teams, which I love, which is a team. Wow, please can you say it? Actually,
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
literally taking the words out of your mouth. Say it.
No, so I'm a big believer that a team is not just a group of people; it's a group of people who trust each other, and I can't emphasize that enough. Building a team is not something you get by virtue of your title. If you're a sales manager, sales VP, what have you, you don't just get that. You didn't inherit a team. You need to build a team. And it's so critical, and you think about your hiring strategy, your recruiting strategy, to how you coach and enable people, and how you do that yourself as a leader is critical. So my teams in the past have often heard me say, how you behave internally is how you'll behave externally. And very critical. So how you collaborate, how you work with people, the consistency that you operate with is going to be exactly how you operate, outside with customers.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, coming back, if you have a team of people that trust each other, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can accomplish, growth opportunities. You'll be, the cadence that you have, the operating rhythm will just be clicking. So.
I did a recent episode with Coralie de Robert, and she was talking about psychological safety, and that's exactly to that point. You have to have that trust with each other so that you can fully lean on each other in those tough times, but also celebrate as a team. And from leaders' perspective, you need to lead with so much vulnerability, but that is tough. And I know that you mentioned the quadrant at the beginning. I'd love to delve a bit deeper into that, because we've spoken about crisis and conflict, and there's probably a lot of leaders listening to this, and even reps thinking, oh, I need to get my notebook out like you. And I think, how can I manage this conflict effectively? And maybe some of the best ways is giving some examples of some times that you've come up against conflict and how you've navigated that, if you could share.
Yeah, I'm going to, just since you called that, I'm going to look at my notebook here for an
it.
example that I kind of put down. So
I love this. You are the most prepared guest I've ever had.
Oh, no. Yeah, so for one example that comes to mind is a customer, I'll just intentionally go with a very common thing that everyone can relate to.
Yeah.
Customer comes and says, the price is too high. What do salespeople typically do? They fumble, they quickly react. They're thinking of the left side of the brain. They're reacting out of fear. And so they're not equipped with the tools of conflict management. Is that a conflict even? It might just be a situation or an issue. It hasn't even escalated to a conflict where you have incompatible goals by different groups. So the first thing you need to do as a salesperson is just breathe. Count to 10. Just simply pause. And my advice is you need to disengage to engage before you engage. You need to pause before you start. And that's the first critical thing. And then one of my favorite, when you think about how you can seek to understand an important principle by the late Clayton Christensen, former Harvard Business School professor, he said, without a good question, a good answer has nowhere to go. So you need to be prepared and be well practiced and rehearsed. And these are things that salespeople need to do. How do you respond to these situations effectively? So some examples, right? Some things I wrote down here is just ask what they want, right? Another thing, ask, how would that solve your problem? So if they say, hey, the price is too high. Okay, so just help me understand. Okay, you're saying the price is too high. What is it you ultimately want? Pause, see what they say. They may say, oh, I want this, this, this. They may say things that are actually not even close to what they just said. They might be complaining about the price. That isn't necessarily the problem.
No.
So if you are skilled in methodical questions and how to ask those, and then peeling them back, use mirroring in your question asking. Chris Voss wrote a great book about negotiation, former FBI hostage negotiator, and he talks a lot about these techniques of use more what and how questions than close-ended why questions, and others like that.
And I also think use their language in what you're saying, because then they're like, oh wow, you're so smart. It's like, well, no, you just said it to me. I'm just feeding it back to you, and it makes them feel like you're listening.
Exactly. It's not. I mean, if you think about a marriage or an outside of the workplace relationship that anyone may have, right? Whether that's you're a coach, you're a volunteer, the object of that relationship is not to win. And if it was, that's a weird relationship, right? That you have, like as a coach to a youth athlete, like I'm winning. Well, like they're not the opponent, right? And in a relationship, the object should be to have fun. The object is to get along. And so then you're thinking about when a conflict arises, it would be crazy to jump into competitive style of conflict management. You need to be collaborative and have a win-win. Sometimes you need to take that compromising position and give up some ground in order to win a battle down the road.
Yeah.
So it's also okay to lose the immediate skirmish or battle because you have your mind on something further down the road.
We were literally just talking about that this morning in our team meeting. Obviously, Wiser Elite does recruitment. And one of the things I love about the team is we're not afraid to say to a candidate that we're speaking to, do you know what? This job probably isn't right for you. You're right. Like, we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here. Like, it's not right. We know it's not right. And work together with them and go, actually, the other opportunity you're working on without us is better. We'll support you. And then down the road, hopefully they'll be like, do you know what? I love that relationship with that person. It was authentic. It wasn't just trying to be pushy. And then they'll come back to you. So always think that what's the saying? Like, be kind to people on your way up because you never know who you'll need on your way down. Like, just be lovely and build that authentic relationship with people. Yeah,
I mean, it would be, and that's a great point. So again, going back to an earlier point in our conversation, often organizations spend so much time trying to recruit top talent. And when the organization feels like they're ready to move on from that person, right? You often get this, like, people jump behind this, like, almost legally scripted, robotic way of behaving instead of thinking, hold on, this is an individual, a human being that I invested a lot of time and effort to coaching, training, hiring, President's Club achievements, whatever it is that you've done to retain them. And then all of a sudden, cold shoulder, we've decided we're going to move on. Well, if organizations were better equipped with, again, understanding how to deal with crisis situations, what happens when the plan doesn't go to plan? What do you do? Those soft skills, again, just going back to the basics of breathe, seek to understand, listen, but listen with the intent of putting yourself in their shoes is absolutely critical. And then just to close the loop and complete the example of this customer, by the way, it's a real example, asking these questions, understanding them, and when they come back and they say, yes, I need the price down to X, and you're like, okay, and how would that resolve the problem for you? Let them talk. When people start talking, they often they'll resolve the conflict or transform it in their own mind.
Yeah.
So if you are a good listener and you ask good questions, then often things will play out in a way where they will kind of put it together. And the true negotiation happens through active listening. It's not through you talking all the time, talking to someone. It's you asking the right questions, pausing, listening, and then being able to react with the right side of your brain.
Yeah, I love that point of pausing, because you go into panic mode in crisis so often. I mean, I do, definitely. And actually, if you just take a second and think, right, let's work with the person that we're talking to instead of trying to always put out a fire. That's not the best way. So I know we're talking about leading successful teams and high performance teams. If we took the example of you're a leader, you've got a sales rep that's not performing, they're not hitting target, they've consistently been under their numbers. Using your quadrant to the good example and then the bad example, could you give us 2 conflicting examples of how, as a leader, you would manage that conversation in an effective way?
Yeah, that's a great one. So again, a bias towards collaboration is where you want to be. So how do you get a situation where it's a win-win for both parties? You have a rep, you want them to hit quota. As a leader, you want to have as many of your reps hitting quota as possible. My goal was to always aim for 80% plus of any team that I led hitting their individual quotas. And then I would be far above my managed quota as a leader, right? If you invest in people properly and you build foundational principles, which so important ones for me are the 3 C's. So consistency, collaboration, and communication are really, really key. And if you aim for those, then you will have already established a bedrock of trust with that individual. And then you're understanding what's going on, right? If this person had an amazing year in the previous year, like they hit it out of the park, they were the top sales rep, they went to President's Club, they got an award, and they did well in the first quarter of the year. They were at the top of the pack across the company average in the second quarter of the year, and then something happens in that next quarter. Well, okay, what were the events leading to that quarter, or what's happening in that person's life that may be contributing to the performance?
What are those anchovies?
Yeah,
That's
what are those
on the
anchovies?
surface,
What are those things that you may not,
Yeah.
people don't even look to understand, that are just right there under the surface? And a good leader will create an environment where people feel safe to do their best work. And that's really critical. That's one of the biggest signs of a great leader, is you have created an environment where people feel safe to do their best work. And then you are aware of those anchovies floating just under the surface, and you're aware that they're swimming calmly, and you know that, okay, what do I need to do? So in kind of brass tacks, thinking about that, the employee, ideally you've created an environment where they're opening up, they're sharing with you what's going on, and then you're working on it together. This is not a competing, hey, your performance is horrible, it needs to improve, and fix it. No, you need to be a really good listener and question asker as a leader.
What are 3 things that you do well as a leader to make sure that your team feels safe? Because I fully agree with that. You have to lead with vulnerability, and to be a good coach, to be a good manager, leader, they have to be able to come to you if they are messing up and go, do you know what, I'm really struggling with this. And if you haven't created that safe environment, they're never going to come to you. And then often it's too late by the time that you're able to help support them. So is there 3 things that you could take away from this today?
That's a great question. 3 things that I would do. One is you have to schedule time to just shut the laptop and get to know people. That's critical. So I'd say that's one thing that I do. And that could be just reading the room and understanding in your one-to-one. Don't always do it. Everyone has different work environments, right? If you have the opportunity to occasionally meet with people that report to you, take the opportunity to go on a walk for your one-to-one every so often. Sometimes it needs to be a web conference. Sometimes it's face-to-face in a conference room. But sometimes you just need to go on a walk and chat. That's key. Just close the laptop, get to know them. That can also be done. I like to do quarterly team outings. I'll give you just a quick story.
Oh God, are you telling us a drunken story?
No. This is quite the opposite. So this is actually a restaurant, and I do not speak French, so I'm going to attempt to say the restaurant name. But it's Lons de Nord.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you speak French? Maybe you can correct me there.
That was
okay.
gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you. Apologies for my French listeners. So this restaurant, there's a location here in London, a few around the world. They actually get paid for this, some promotional spend here. But what they do is that it is an amazing concept of the restaurant. So it is a restaurant where the servers are all blind. They're genuinely blind.
I have heard of this restaurant, and it's a dark restaurant, isn't
Yes.
it? Yes,
Yeah.
pitch black.
Yeah.
I love the idea of this restaurant. I want to go.
It's fantastic. It's actually, my wife first learned about it from one of our favorite films called About Time.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that film.
Okay, so there's a scene in there.
I'm really terrified to go to the restaurant though, because I'm like, what are they actually serving you? Because you
Yeah,
can't
well,
see.
that's part of it. So, so basically what happens is you go there, you pre-select the menu. If you vegan or vegetarian, do you want beef or do you want seafood? And that's it. And each of them, it's like the Matrix. It's like, which pill are you taking? So it's actually just color coded which color you want.
Oh, wow.
And then they say, oh, so-and-so has the blue menu. When you go in, put all your watches, devices, everything that makes a beep or emits a light goes into a locker. Then you line up in a row and with your hands on the person's shoulder in front of you, you're blindfolded, taken upstairs, and then kind of go back and forth through this, like, I think like corridor, and then you walk into this room, you're sat down, and when I say it, pitch dark, completely, not a glimmer, nothing, no light, and obviously the blindfold at this point is taken off once you get upstairs. You sit down, and I took one of my teams there, and we're at a table more or less this size, about 8 of us that evening, and you can only be in that environment for about an hour before you just kind of psychologically time out, because you're holding this conversation. Just imagine your eyes are closed and you're chatting, but you can't pick up on people's facial expressions, right? Even just both of us doing this right now, is there a pause? Is he okay? Oh no, he's just pausing for inflection. Well, you don't know that because your eyes aren't telling you that story.
Yeah.
Right? So this experience, it gave us the opportunity, and I'll open my eyes now, but it gave us the opportunity to put ourselves in the shoes of other people who that was their everyday reality. Mm-hmm. That was their day-to-day. And we sampled that for 1 hour? And what that did, people have talked about that for years, that experience.
Wow.
So that, again, that's shut the laptop, go out and do something memorable with people, and they constantly talk about the lessons they learned from that experience of, I felt like I've grown greater empathy for other people and understanding, and hey, like I thought I was really fearful or claustrophobic of the dark, and actually I learned that I'm stronger than I am, and things like that.
Yeah.
That's one, and then the other two I would just like quickly say is show genuine interest in people. Don't fake it. Actually, and if you're a person where that is difficult, lots of different types of people, just really make a concerted effort to think about people not as a transaction in the business sense. A lot of people and businesses operate quota planning and their capacity planning, and people are often treated like, okay, we need this many heads in order to reach target. Well, the job of a great leader is to then bring that down to the kind of the field level and invest in those people and understand what makes them tick.
Yeah.
That's really key. And then the third thing I would say is be consistent as a leader with everything you do. As a leader, it's not about what you tolerate. It's not about what you preach. It's not about what you say. It's about what you tolerate. And that first starts with you as a leader. What type of behavior are you tolerating from yourself?
Yeah.
Are you being consistent with the team? And then are you being fair and consistent across the board with what's expected?
Great points. And I must try that restaurant.
Yeah,
I'll let you
absolutely.
know when I try it.
Yeah.
That'll be our next team outing. Do you think good managers, try to eliminate conflict? Do you think that's a good thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the paradox is we actually need more conflict, not less.
Interesting. Why?
So conflict, the very nature of conflict, it invites an opportunity for change. So there's constructive conflict, there's positive conflict, and negative conflict. And so understanding the basis and the roots of that conflict is really key. If it's negative conflict, you need to proactively address that. If it's positive conflict, that could be an opportunity to bring two parties together, two highly like A-type personalities, high-performing individuals who may have different viewpoints on something, and they're not quite in an entrenched position where fear and is dominating, fear and stress is dominating their psyche, they might just have an issue. And when it's at the issue stage, when it's just a situation and not a conflict, you have the opportunity to harness that conflict and see what great idea can come from it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a quote here that I really liked when I was doing some research for this. It was from Mark Twain. He said, "Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than anything on which it is poured." I know when we're talking about conflict, I mean, we mentioned it's really easy to react straight away and jump on it, and actually you need to stop and take a breath. How do we take the emotion out of addressing conflict? Would that be the main thing, is breathing, or are there any other areas? Because I think this is probably what a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, that's a great, I love that quote, by the way. The first thing, so active listening diffuses conflict. But to get to the point where you are active listening, where you're able to deploy that tactic, you need to breathe. You need to pause. So that is absolutely critical. Thomas Jefferson, during the time of the Constitutional Convention, former U.S. president, he is famous for saying, when angry or when frustrated, count to 10, and when really angry, count to 100. And that concept of being able to control yourself, being able to think. Human beings are not creatures of logic. We're just not. We're creatures of emotion. And so we have to always remember to just pause, take a step back, breathe before we then engage. And when we engage, seek to understand, do less talking and more active listening in order to diffuse a potential conflict.
Yeah. And when you're listening, you can be coming up with so many different ways to take this. If you've been hit by a bit of a boulder and you're like, right, I can't get through this, and you need to actually take that second. And that is, I think, for myself as well and so many other people, when we're hit with conflict, we really think that that is our only way, and it's now been lost. And so we kind of panic. And you told an incredible story about an elevator, which is all around shifting your perspective on things. And it was a great learning. So I'd love for you to share it.
Yeah, so it's basically, it comes down to problem framing, this story. So in Manhattan, this is a true story, by the way, there's a Harvard Business Review article on it. There was an elevator where tenants of this building were constantly complaining that the elevator was too slow. And so immediately the building management went into crisis mode. And what they didn't do was breathe, take a step back, pause, and seek for understanding and look to find those anchovies floating to the surface. What they did is they immediately reacted to, the problem must be the elevator's too slow. So they addressed it through a mechanical lens. And they said, we need to replace all these parts. We need the elevator shaft. We need to do this. And they said it was just way too expensive. Economically, it was unviable for them to do. So they went back. There was one person in that group who said, hold on, wait a second. What if the complaint is not the problem? What if they're complaining the elevator's too slow, but the real problem is that they're not distracted and that they're not busy? And this is this was before the era of smartphones and what have you, right? Where people were just naturally distracted by looking into a black mirror.
That's why you see people on the train just looking at their phone.
Yeah.
They're not doing it.
Now it's not a problem, right? Yeah. Before the advent of that, people were complaining about this. So what this person did is they said, listen, let's experiment here. Let's beta test this. And they put in mirrors in the elevator.
Wow, we are so vain.
Mirrors in the elevator. Now, all of us, we
love the elevator.
Almost every elevator you go into, there's mirrors of some sort. Even the steely polished ones reflect.
Yeah, and the lighting's always awful because it's right above your head.
Yeah.
I find that
so now all of a sudden, people are looking in the mirror at themselves. Yeah. They're checking their teeth. They're doing their hair. They're distracted. Music in the elevator as well, right? You get that great smooth jazz playing in the elevator. Well, those things, all of a sudden, they implement those in this building, and the complaint stopped.
Wow.
So the problem is not the solution, and it's problem reframing. It's not always taking at face value what a customer says, what someone on your team says, what someone's complaining about, that might be a symptom of the problem. It actually might have nothing to do with the real problem. So that's a real skill in understanding how to manage conflict and address it.
So interesting. Well, thank you so much for going through this today. I've learned so much. And as I said at the start of this episode, this is something that I've not really learned too much about, which I think is literally showing up a mirror to the fact that we need to be talking about this a bit more, especially people leading those teams. So thank you. But as I finish the episode with every guest on Sales Unfiltered, I'd love to know, what is one challenge that you faced in your career or personal life that's really shaped you to where you are today?
Oh, there's a couple different ways I can go with this. So for me, I was on a career trajectory where my background was in conflict resolution. And I did grad school here in the UK studying in a peace studies department. And I got accepted to do a peace studies PhD. And I was on track to do a lot of field work, continuing the work in conflict zones. And life happened as I was kind of going through this whole journey. I had gotten married. And then my wife and I decided to have children, and that decision, and once our two young boys came into the world, that really impacted my why and my purpose in everything that I did. So I shifted from this academic field work practitioner in conflict crisis management to applying those skills and bridging that into the corporate space and into sales, into building high performance teams. But I did this so I didn't have to also raise a family in some of these really difficult environments that were not safe for bringing up a family.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the big decisions. My family has impacted my purpose, my why for everything I do, and it led to a big career shift.
What is your purpose and why now?
Yeah, I would say my why is always go for it. Just when you think about whatever that is, if you have an idea, if you have something you want to accomplish, don't sit in this zone of thinking about it. Then you move to step 2, thinking about it. Step 3, thinking about it. Just go right to the core and do it. All right, not to infringe on any Nike copyright infringement there, but yeah,
just do it.
Just do it.
That's really authentic. Why? Where did you come up with that?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's just like simple. Yeah, it's like a check mark. New Balance, actually. Sorry, Nike.
Sorry.
But yeah, I would say go for it, in whatever sense that means, right? Just take that jump, take that leap of faith, take that risk. Maybe another way to say that is become more comfortable with risk. You don't grow unless you risk things. Yeah. And that's really, really key in any endeavor that I've been involved in. Anything in my personal life, my professional life, you have to be comfortable with risk. And risk, guess what, is part of conflict. So you need to be comfortable with conflict and with risk in order to grow, in order to go and make that leap of faith.
Yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes,
for
yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
And with just going for it, that's why you've taken up sailing. And we did speak before that you wanted to sail the world. So next time I see you, I expect you to be on that boat, getting uncomfortable, just going for it and just doing it. But thank you so much, Will, for coming on. I've learned so much. I'm sure all of the listeners have as well, and cannot wait to see where you go next in your career and implement this strategy into those teams.
Perfect. Thank you, Izzy. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sales Unfiltered. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a quick review. See you next week.